Hello and thanks for joining us. First, his clothes helped to define 1980s power dressing. The French designer Thierry Mugler became known through his promotion of shoulder pads and miniskirts. He's dressed the likes of Ivana Trump, Lady Gaga and Kim Kardashian. Now his life's work is the focus of an exhibition in Paris, as Wasim Cornet reports.
Thierry Mugler and his legendary dresses, made of revolutionary fabrics and techniques. This is the hybrid dress. Each scale was made and painted by hand and only worn on stage for 2 minutes. This is the insect dress worn by Jerry Hall in 1997. And this one, made for a George Michael music video, is shaped like handlebars. Spectacular works of art made for free and unique women.
Thierry Mugler is someone who wanted to play an active role in the emancipation of women, and by giving them the tools to do so. In the 1980s, a lot of women became CEOs. They made their way into governments. These were important moments in our culture, and he wanted to take part.
But Thierry Mugler was not just a designer, and this exhibit pays homage to his multifaceted life, the central theme being stretching limits and being anything but conventional.
Mugler is an artist who's complete. He grew up in Strasbourg, danced ballet at the opera there. He's a fashion creator and also a photographer, a perfume inventor, a scenographer, a costume creator. He embodied globalization before most people did.
Opening night for the exhibit was held during Paris's Fashion Week, which was online only last year, making this event especially exciting for everyone attending.
He's a master of couture, of creation, of photography.
What has stuck with me is his way of drawing women, the very sexy clothes he makes. And his runway shows were always spectacular.
I've always thought he was one of the most inventive creators out there. He has this obsession of creating a whole universe, and even a passion for areas outside of fashion.
Thierry Mugler retired from the fashion world in 2002. This exhibit showcasing some of his best work will run until late April of next year.
A year after the deadly port explosion in Beirut, a Paris museum is paying tribute to the resilience of the Lebanese art scene. The Arab World Institute is hosting an exhibition called Lights of Lebanon. It presents an impressive selection of modern and contemporary works from the early days of Lebanon's independence up to the present moment. Wasim Cornet has the story.
This Paris museum is displaying the work of 3 generations of artists from Lebanon and its global diaspora. Their work revisits the country's past, from the Beirut explosion in 2020 all the way back to the country's golden era post-independence.
I've been trying to imprint a portrait of Beirut in my work or on a canvas for almost a decade. When you dive into Beirut's streets and alleys, it's as if you were diving headfirst into a history book. Those walls have so many stories to tell. It's a wall painting of the history of its people, and a complex history at that. Complex from a social, economic, political, and religious point of view.
More than 100 paintings, sculptures, and fabrics are on display. Most of them were donated by Claude and France Lemon, art collectors. Lebanon is at the heart of this display, but also on the very walls of the exhibit room.
What you see around you is literally earth from Lebanon. I think the contrast between this rose-tinted earth and the colors of the paintings works really well. I was really inspired by the earth because the Arab world today is anything but united. But the common background in our heritage is the the earth, the rocks, the texture, so I based myself off of those tones to create this area.
Shawqi Shukini's totems and Yazan Halwani's politically engaged paintings are all a part of the exhibit.
Beirut has always been the site of an active art scene. From the country's independence in 1943 to today, even during the Civil War. It's a beautiful story. Not just art for the sake of it, it's the story of our humanity. And I really hope this way of approaching things will touch people in a different way.
The exhibit will be on display at the Institute of the Arab World in Paris until January 1st.
His painting, The Birth of Venus, has captivated us for centuries. Now a new exhibition in Paris is zooming in on Botticelli and the woman who inspired his work. Botticelli, artist and designer, is on at the Jacquemart-André Museum. Here's Olivia Salazar-Winspear.
She's an icon of Renaissance art, but also of feminine beauty. Botticelli's Venus emerges resplendent like a pearl from an oyster, a mythical goddess in a fantastical landscape. But there's nothing fictional about that face. Simonetta Vespucci was a very real resident of 15th century Florence, aged around 20 at the time of painting. She was the muse of artist Sandro Botticelli, who depicted himself here to the side of one of his canvases. And her fine features can be seen in various examples of his painting, with a charisma and appeal that inspired her nickname, La Bella Simonetta.
We could say that Venus was a supermodel of the Renaissance, because she represented the apex of beauty at the time, at least a Western ideal of beauty.
Using Simonetta as a model, a group of Renaissance painters established an ideal of female beauty, a winning formula that involved flowing, golden hair, an oval face, rosy lips, and a perfectly proportioned body. Specific codes that were then deployed by other artists of the time who reproduced this archetype, which became part of the canon and whose influence can still be seen today.
We are the descendants of a humanist culture, so that means this sort of physical beauty resonates with us, and it's still relevant when it comes to the models we put on a pedestal, including stars of television and film.
Unknowingly then, Botticelli was something of an influencer, his aesthetic legacy seen today on the red carpet or the catwalk in the contemporary goddesses who hark back to the Venus Simonetta.
Next, a documentary out in France that tells the remarkable story of teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg. Starting with her one-person school strike outside the Swedish parliament, Greta follows her rise to prominence and how her campaign sparks strikes around the world. The film premiered at the Venice Film Festival last year, where I met the director, Nathan Grossman.
And since I don't fly, because of the enormous climate impact of aviation, it's going to be a challenge.
I learned a lot about climate change and a lot about climate facts, which is really interesting. And about her, I think what surprised me most from the public persona that we've seen is actually that she's very funny and that she has this laughter, which is my sound designers hated that laughter because it cut through every microphone and every headphone.
And what does she think about her film being shown at the Venice Film Festival?
I think, Greta's never been in for this, being a celebrity or anything. She's doing this to put focus on the climate crisis. That's her main goal. She was worried that the film, she wouldn't recognize herself, in the portrayal, that I would make her into someone else. And that when she watched the film, she actually recognized herself. So I think that made me very happy.
Next, it was invented by the French, named after a well-known French chef, but the world-famous cooking championships, the Bokus Door, hasn't been won by France since 2013. That is, until this year. Michelin star Davy Tissot won the top prize in the competition. That's a sort of World Cup for chefs. James Maholland reports.
The French national anthem sung on the podium, just like in all top sports competitions. In the centre, David Tissot, the winner of the Bokus Door, something of a World Cup for chefs. For 2 days, 21 teams competed in 2 events, judged by an international panel. In addition to the traditional dish made from beef chuck, this year's event also proposed a takeaway box with entree, main and dessert, all on the theme of cherry tomato. France took honours ahead of Denmark and Norway.
Non, ça fait 10 ans qu'il n'est pas revenu à la maison et là où je suis plus fier, c'est quand même moi en tant que Lyonnais. Voilà, ça c'est énorme. Là pour le coup, il revient vraiment à la maison.
A reference to Paul Bokus, who also hails from the Lyon region. Known worldwide for his many Michelin-starred restaurants, the legendary chef founded the competition in 1987. The Bokus Door takes place every 2 years as part of the International Catering Exhibition. It's been 8 years since France last won the prize, but Bokus's home country remains the most successful in this, the chief of all cook-offs, ahead of Norway and Denmark.
And just before we go, imagine visiting the world in one place, celebrating art and culture, tasting cuisines from around the world and hearing exciting ideas from great minds. After 8 years of planning and billions of dollars in spending, the Middle East's first ever World Fair has opened in Dubai. Postponed due to COVID, Expo 2020 aims to attract 25 million visitors. Held every 5 years, expos see 200 countries showing off their latest innovations. And at the French Pavilion, visitors can step inside Notre Dame as part of a new virtual reality experience. We'll leave you with the opening ceremony. Remember our website, we're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.